This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by Thrifty Traveler Premium. Travel more for less. Amateur Traveler, episode 869. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about temples and caves, skyscrapers and spices, elephants and ghats, as we go on a cruise around the Bay of Bengal. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about a Bay of Bengal cruise. I'd like to welcome to the show Elsa Dixon, who is a travel writer, who's come to talk to us about a cruise from Bangkok to Mumbai, India. Elsa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And that sounds like a cruise I would be interested in doing, a little less interested in the simple Caribbean cruise, but you're doing a little more adventure here. Why did you decide to do something in that corner of the world?
There's a little bit of a story behind it because I was a passenger on Viking Sky that nearly went on the rocks there off the coast of Norway. We had compensation, and as compensation, we were offered a free cruise to the value of that one. So we wanted to go to China, but then the virus broke out, so we couldn't do China. And then we changed to Russia, and then the war broke out. We couldn't do Russia. So we decided, this Bay of Bengal sounds like a wonderful idea. And the Eastern cultures have always intrigued me. I'm also a music teacher, so I was particularly interested also in especially the cultural aspects.
Excellent. And we're talking about 4 different countries on this: Thailand, Malaysia, five.
Yes.
Singapore, Sri Lanka, and India.
Yes, and the other reason also is I'm originally from South Africa, and we have a large Malay population in Cape Town.
Okay.
And so for me, that was quite an enticing thought that I could go and see where they come from.
Excellent. Now, having done this cruise, why should someone else follow in your footsteps?
It's such a great experience. It's a totally different world. The exotic culture, the dresses, the Eastern cultures, the food, the wonderful temples. It's so intricate, the colors and the patterns that they use on their temples, Hindu and Buddhist. And then also the ceremonies, the music, the dancing. And then what really struck me was the architecture. I was amazed at the tall buildings and in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and leaning ones and straight up, and it is just incredible. So it's a totally different world. And then also to see how they've assimilated different cultures in the different countries, and how colonialism played such a huge role, and how they've incorporated it into their cultures also, and how the countries now operate as modern countries. So all that I found absolutely fascinating.
And was this your first visit to all 5 countries, or had you been to any or all of them before?
No, I have not been to any of those before. No.
Okay, excellent. You started in Bangkok. Let's start with your itinerary. You flew into Bangkok, I'm assuming?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we flew into Bangkok. The friend who shared my experience in Norway, she traveled with me, and we decided to do the pre-tour in Bangkok, Thailand. Then when we boarded the ship, the very first excursion was exactly what we had already done in the pre-excursion, so we skipped that. That was
Always
first,
good to read
that's
what the included itineraries are before you...
Yeah, we actually did not realize what we were going to do there, but that's a tip. So I wouldn't recommend doing the pre-trip if you do the Viking cruise. I would go just straight to the cruise itself because it's a long distance.
Well, and we've talked about Viking before on the show, back when I did a Viking cruise. I've done a couple. And one of the things to know about this class of cruising, so you're not in an economy cruise, you're in a step up here. And so there are included shore excursions for every stop. There may also be something more expensive that you can buy, but there's always something that is included. And so that was the included one for you was, I'm guessing that went to the palace and to
The
some of the major
Emerald
temples.
Buddha, the Grand Palace,
Yep.
and the Reclining Buddha. We probably would have done it again, but the only thing is the distance from Bangkok to the terminal where we had to board the cruise line to get on the bus and go that long distance back again to Bangkok. That was the biggest
Oh, okay,
problem.
so it's a Bangkok cruise, but that doesn't mean
The
that the
ship
cruise
is
port's
not right
actually
there.
Bangkok.
Yeah, it's a long way from there, let me tell you.
Got it.
Yeah, we had an excellent guide on the bus, though, I must admit. He really gave us excellent background information, and I never realized that any man could actually be a monk for a period of 2 years. And it's
Oh, uh-huh.
actually a good thing for the family name if you can say that you experienced the monastery for 2 years. So that was something that I never knew that I learned on the bus.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you listened to the Amateur Traveler episode on Bangkok before you did your Bangkok portion of your itinerary.
Oh, I did not actually prepare very well for the
Elsa has not
cruise.
listened to the
Oh
show
my
before,
gosh.
and she told me that already. So I'm just giving her a hard time. But now she knows for next time. Now you know
For
for next
next
time.
time, I will definitely tune in. Never knew about you at that stage,
That's okay.
unfortunately.
Are there other things that you want to say about the Bangkok portion of your itinerary, either the trip you did on your own, highlights of the trip, surprises?
Okay. We stayed at a wonderful hotel on the, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Chao Phraya River.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, we did not have time to do the free boat ride because you can do from all those hotels, they have jetties there where you can go free across the river to the other side where you
Hmm.
have big shopping centers and so on.
Right.
What stood out was the incredible food. The
Hmm.
buffets, they were just amazing. And I'm sure we experienced food that you would pay a fortune for at a restaurant. Even cracked marbled eggs that they make with tea. They crack the egg shell and
Hmm.
they soak the egg in tea. The tea seeps in, obviously, and then when you open up the egg, it has these beautiful patterns on the egg. Unusual little touches that we were surprised with. And yeah, we did not do any show while we were there, but the first night on the cruise, we had a wonderful traditional dance show,
Hmm.
and that was really a highlight. Yeah.
Excellent. And if somebody is doing this cruise, definitely recommend a few days in Bangkok at a time. I love Bangkok as long as you're not in Bangkok traffic. If you're on the subway or
Yeah.
the MRT or the SkyTrain, then it's a great city. It's a little hot and humid.
Yeah.
Definitely a city that my wife
Yeah.
wasn't interested in coming to when I was
Yeah.
planning on going the first time. I said,
Yeah.
I can't believe you don't want to go. You must be expecting the wrong thing. And I said, what are you
Yeah.
expecting? She said, I picture it'll be hot, humid, and chaotic. And I went, yes, that is
Yeah.
Bangkok, but a
Yeah,
city I love.
driving in, I was intrigued by all the gold touches of
Yeah,
golden
oh, sure.
statues along the way and the buildings. That struck me immediately. And then also the mixture of like slums and decent accommodation. It was, yeah, quite intriguing. Yeah, I was a little bit at the losing end because it was just 4 weeks after I had a 5-hour operation, so
Oh
I
my,
was not
okay.
able to do all the walks to experience the local markets and so
Mm.
on. So I lost out a little bit on that, but I hope to go back again.
And when you go back, I hope you can experience that and the street food and some of that
Mm,
other things. But we'll move on in your itinerary. So from there, you went
yeah.
to Malaysia.
Actually, we first went to Koh Samui.
Oh, right, in Thailand. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So in
Koh Samui.
Thailand, yeah. And just a tip there, or two tips really. When the cruise director of the excursions introduced this tour, he actually said it might be difficult for people to get from the tender onto the land,
Mm.
from the tender boat, because you obviously take it was an island, Koh
Yep.
Samui. Because I had the problem of not just having the operation, I thought, oh, I better not do this one. And anyway, my friend went and she said, oh my gosh, it was so easy. There was no problem. So don't let them put you off. Go to the island. And the other thing is, my friend said, take cash and water because they do sell souvenirs there and food, and it's a long day. So if you do an excursion there, remember to take your cash along. She told me that it was an incredible experience seeing the smiling Buddha on the
Hmm.
island, and also it was part of the complex of temples there called Wat Plai Lahem. I think that's how you pronounce it. WAT Wat PLAILAEM. That was an excellent experience, and also there's a big Buddha temple there. And then they also went to a coconut plantation,
Hmm.
and yeah, it was a great excursion. Highly recommend it.
Excellent. And Koh Samui is down in the very southern part of Thailand, and so we're talking tropical island here. So it is,
It was
yes.
hot. You needed, yeah,
Is
you
there any
needed.
portion of this cruise though that was not hot?
No, I think it got hotter and hotter.
Okay, I was going to say you're basically cruising. When you're down in Singapore, which is your next stop, you're pretty much on the equator. So,
Yeah. Yeah, Singapore was a wonderful experience also.
hmm.
We did the bus tour. Unfortunately, we were there only for one day. I think one
Hmm.
should actually spend more time there if you can swing that. We went along the Singapore River, and we already saw the British influence here with all the residences there.
Hmm.
And Singapore is a mixture of cultures. You have the British flavored, I'm sure there might be even some expats living there,
Oh,
Little
sure.
India,
Hmm.
and in the Arab quarter,
Hmm.
where you have Malays and Yemenis and Sumatrans and Indonesian people living in that area, the Arab quarter, and Chinatown. And then, of course, there's a big Muslim influence there as well. So, yeah, it's a mixture of cultures.
Hmm.
And there was one excursion that I would have loved to do, and that was to explore Singapore by different modes of transport. So, this particular excursion offered bus, riverboat, trishaw or trishaw, and then MRT subway. So it was like people going there had guides that they had to follow and find the route by themselves. So that sounded like a real adventure. So that I would say is a good way of exploring Singapore and really getting to know the town.
You talked about the different cultures. Did you go down into Chinatown, or did you go see the Sultan Mosque, or which ones of those did you get a chance to see?
No, it was just a bus tour that was
Yep.
included. And as I said, because I had the operation recovery, I wasn't able to do one of those long walking ones.
Sure.
But it was certainly very interesting. And another tip that my friend actually said to me, she did the walking tour, and it was called Peranakan walking tour,
Okay. The
but it
Peranakan.
but it did not include, funny enough, the museum.
The Peranakan
So
Museum.
yeah, so
And so we're talking about the Straits-born Chinese culture. It is a good museum. I do
oh,
recommend it if you get a chance to. It's a fascinating
great.
culture there
Yeah,
as you
yeah,
get that Straits influenced Chinese culture. So it's both Malaysian and Chinese at the same time, and it's not a large museum, but it's
oh, okay,
well presented.
great, yeah. No, but I did enjoy seeing the town itself, and of course we did have a chance to taste some of the food,
Hmm.
satay,
Hmm. You can't go to Singapore and not try the food.
and then of course the Singapore sling.
Okay, there you go.
We had to do that one.
And this episode, I think people are picking up, is going to be a little different than some of our other episodes where we tend to do more of a deep dive into Bangkok, for instance, or into Singapore and where should you try the street food and such. But I thought this was a tour that might be an interesting starting tour for some people who are interested in seeing these places, but are maybe just a little hesitant still to,
Yes,
jump into the street food
yeah,
culture and things like that.
yes,
And you talked
yeah.
about a couple different styles of shore excursions
Transport,
that were available
yeah.
for you.
Oh
And it
yes,
sounds like
yeah.
they cover both a variety of mobility
Oh,
also.
there were a lot of different types of
Hmm.
excursions for every, and I must say, Viking does such an excellent job on the ship itself, especially on sea days. But we had the most wonderful, informative lectures and presentations,
Hmm.
and also excellent entertainment and food relating to the countries that we were going to visit. So it was really an educational experience just being on the cruise, besides all the luxury of the cruise, of course.
Hmm. No, they have a nice product. I enjoy the
Excellent.
Viking Ocean. You
Yeah.
specifically are doing Viking Ocean here versus
Yeah.
Viking River cruises, or now
Yes.
the new Viking
Oh,
excursion.
yeah, the
More
Explorer
exactly.
ones. Yeah.
I came out of the pandemic with a bank of unused airline points and a desire to do more travel. But finding cheap flights and points and miles award space can be tough. Wouldn't it be great to get alerts when flight prices drop or when there are deals on that business class seat I really want? Thrifty Traveler Premium does just that. They find the best deals from over 200 US and Canadian departure airports. Thrifty Traveler's flight deal experts are searching 24/7 for flight deals so you don't have to. These deals are bookable with cash or with points and miles from coach to first class. So, some recent deals that I thought were interesting were Minneapolis to Europe for only 24,000 miles, New Zealand for under 55,000 miles, and Costa Rica for $399. Never miss another incredible award deal by subscribing to Thrifty Traveler Premium. Use the code AT10 for $10 off your first year at thriftytraveler.com/premium. That's thriftytraveler.com/premium and the code AT10. And thanks to Thrifty Traveler for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. We're moving on to Malaysia here. I think that's your next stop.
Yes. Kuala Lumpur, that was the place we stopped. And this is also the British influence here is very noticeable. That's one thing that really struck me about all these different countries along the Bay of Bengal, that they all, virtually all of them, have this British colonial influence, and you can actually draw a line through. They all have more or less similar histories and how they incorporate it into their culture. I might talk more about that later.
But Thailand would be a little different because Thailand was never
Yeah,
colonized, but it was
yeah,
influenced by
yeah,
the
yeah,
the British region,
yeah. That
British in the region.
yes, that was the one sort of exception there. Yeah, with Lumpur, I once again did the included one, and I saw the National Monument for the Fallen Soldiers. That was really wonderful. Oh, yes, and we went to the Batu Caves, which
Okay.
has two steep steps up. It's an incredible sight. And the people, and that's another thing that struck me about these countries, how many people were congested in areas.
Sure.
Yeah, and the colors, the beautiful temples and figures carved and painted in these wonderful ornamental colors. And the Batu caves, there are three caves, and my friend did the steps up, and she says at the top there's a ornate Hindi shrine, and
Right.
also there's some monkeys there that you had to avoid. But I stayed at the bottom and I just enjoyed all the wonderful sights and the people who obviously went there for religious reasons. And then you had the tourists. There's a
Hmm.
nice tourist shop there for souvenirs, very nice quality things also. And they also sold local products there.
Okay.
And then after that, we went to the National Monument, and then we saw the old British railway station. We could not go into the National Mosque, that was closed for us.
Hmm.
And then we went to Independence Square, which was actually a huge area, very interesting also. And while we were there, I think they had some soccer match somewhere, and this bus came by with people playing music instruments, and it was really quite an exciting sight to see that people get so excited about their sport. And yeah, our final stop then was the Petronas Twin Towers with
Sure.
the little bridge across there. Yeah, so I would just say that when you go there and you want to see the museums, to just be aware that some might be closed because of like Muslim holidays or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Anything else you want to say on Kuala Lumpur, or shall we move along?
Yeah, of course, the Malaysian influence here. This is where we started getting the curry chicken and chicken satay and some
Hmm.
balls, and they were right up my street. Love that. Very multicultural.
So you were in Malaysia for the first time and were getting homesick, strangely enough.
Yes, yes, because our food in South Africa,
I
a
get that.
lot of it is influenced by that. Yes.
Interesting. That's funny.
But we did go to Georgetown as well in Malaysia. And yeah, there, the reclining Buddha, and the ones that you see on the tourist recommendations, the Burmese temple with a standing Buddha, and the Temple of the Thousand Buddhas, where they also apparently have turtle feeding. I did not do that one. So that was the other town we saw in. And there's a lot of old England there as well, being Malaysia's oldest city.
Okay. I'd
Yeah,
forgotten that. Okay.
yeah. It also has the largest Buddhist temple in Malaysia. It's called the Lok Si, Loksi.
Okay. Anything else you want to mention about Malaysia before we move on?
No, I think I've done
Okay.
what I can there.
And this is the way that the cruise goes too, is you get to experience a culture and then you move on.
I tell you, it just goes a little too fast sometimes.
Uh-huh.
And actually, when you go through your photos again, you sometimes only realize what you've seen, and you start appreciating the tour even more. The cruise, you think, "Wow, yes, I did see that," and then it all makes more sense in retrospect sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It is a sampling platter. It's very different from a deep dive into culture thing. I think
Yeah,
it can give you a
yeah,
good idea of where you're going to want to go back to.
yeah,
I'm not a fan of the cruise no place cruises because I want to see a destination. But this is just a sampling. But
yeah,
I find that it makes it really important for me to do my trip journaling, or my wife will do our trip journaling, so we'll keep track of what we saw today, because tomorrow is going to be so different that we might easily forget it by Wednesday if we have not written down what we've
yeah.
seen. And of course, the pictures, as you say, always help too for
Oh,
me.
yeah, absolutely. But what is nice about Viking, of course, is that daily program that they
Right.
give out.
Hmm. Sure.
And so they summarize things nicely in there also. And you think you're on a cruise, you're just going to relax and have a eat and drink and what have you, but then you're so busy with all the presentations and the lectures that you want to attend, and so it's actually quite tough keeping up with everything.
I don't know if you can, but
But I like that you feel you're learning something all the way, and it prepares you for where you when you go to the onto land, of course.
then you must have had a day at sea as you sailed
Few
across the Bay
days,
of Bengal.
a few days,
A
yeah,
few days.
yes, 2 days here, 1 day there, 2 days. That's it takes quite a long time by ship. If you want to do that as a week-long thing to go to the different countries, you will have to fly.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
When your next stop was Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, Colombo. Yeah, that was actually also very interesting. Once again, I must come back to the British. One of the landmarks is the Face Hotel, and I actually went there that evening for a cultural evening, and that you could see the Sri Lanka dances and learn about the culture and the different meanings of the dances, the stories. And blow me down, the ship didn't tell us in advance. They had a surprise cultural evening, exactly the same thing on the ship that same evening. I was so upset because it was much nicer on the ship because the stage was up there and you could see everything beautifully. Whereas we went to the hotel and we were stuck in this big room but no stage, and the waiters kept on going through the audience, and so you had to look this way and then try and see what's happening in the front. Oh my gosh. But what can you do? But Viking surprised us there. I could not have planned that one. And I wanted to see the cultural dancing. It was really beautiful, though. Yeah, I would recommend a cultural evening as an excursion if the ship doesn't offer it. Yeah, and then of course, here there were a lot of excursions offered actually. One of them was the Ceylon tea experience.
Oh, so up into the high country.
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay.
The Old Town, the British Parliament building's still there. The Lotus Tower
And that's
was
the
that
tallest
was that.
building in
Yes.
the country, and then I think the 19th tallest in the world. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. And I would say if you do your own tour, I would look at the months that you go because that you could incorporate perhaps a festival, like
Hmm.
the Festival of Lights in Sri Lanka is in May, and you can have the Diwali festival. I would recommend the Chinese New Year festival, and that's in February. And
Okay.
quite a few of these countries, Thailand, and I think Singapore, and even Malaysia, I think they all have the New Year festival.
Hmm.
So that would be nice to experience some festival.
And then you only had two more stops and one more country here.
Actually, let me just get back to Sri Lanka because there's the Galley Fort,
Okay.
and it's apparently very hilly and lots of cobblestones. So if you have mobility issues, maybe that's something to just take into account.
Shall we move on then to Goa?
Oh yeah, now we're in India. Goa is very interesting also because it has the Portuguese influence. And
Hmm.
the house that the tour books also recommend is the Braganza House. And this was a Hindu family who originally owned the house, and they converted to the Catholic faith so that they could have better relations with the Portuguese government. And they had this enormous house built there, the Braganza House, which is a very popular tourist attraction today. Yes, and then 84% of the country is Hindu. Yeah, once again, one has the influence there. Yeah, that's about all I want to say about Goa. Because we
Okay.
just did, it was a very short bus tour just through Goa.
What was your impression of Goa as you compared that later on with your stop in Mumbai? My impression is that Goa is going to be much more of a tropical destination, for instance, less of a modern city than Mumbai. I don't know if that's at
Yeah.
all accurate.
Yes, no, I think you're right. Goa seemed to be more traditional, and the Portuguese influence was quite noticeable, at
Hmm.
least on the trip that we did. Yeah, whereas Mumbai, wow, talk about a lot of people. The market there at the gateway of India, that to me was India. Now I'm in India, whereas I didn't get that feeling with Goa. And we walked through this market, and it was just incredible. All the people, the vendors with their huge trays on their heads, selling different products and carting foodstuffs from point A to point B. Now, at the Gateway of India, one of the other possible excursions that my friend did was the boat ride to the elephant caves.
Okay.
And then there, she used the litter to take her to the caves because apparently it's quite a steep, long distance to get there. But she highly recommends that excursion. Yeah, and then I did a wonderful bus ride. We went along Marine Drive, then we went to Malabar Hill and Park with the hanging gardens. And the tour guide also told us that in the past, the people would bring the dead to that hill and leave the bodies there. But now, of course, that doesn't happen anymore. And then we went to Dobie, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, hopefully, Dobie Gut, where the locals do their laundry. And every square inch is covered with washing, but they don't use clothes pegs, they tie the washing with knots onto the wires, the lines. But that was quite a sight to behold, all the laundry place. And I think people pay to have their laundry done there as well. And then we had a very interesting excursion to the Mahatma Gandhi Museum. Once again, that was of particular interest to me because in South Africa, Gandhi played a big role in the anti apartheid movement. There's a statue of him in Johannesburg, and he was on the East Coast in the KwaZulu Natal area for a long time. He lived there too. But this museum was fascinating They had boxes depicting scenes from different stages in his life, depicted in these boxes just on display. It was very lively to see the progression of his life through actual little figures. Oh, yes, and something that struck me in India was the bamboo scaffolding that people
Hmm.
climb on these scaffolding to build buildings or maintain things. Couldn't believe that they could put their body weight on bamboo scaffolding. So that was very interesting.
As we've talked about your itinerary, then you actually stayed on in India and did an extended tour.
Yes. We decided to do the post extension. Of course, with Viking, you can do that as a pre extension if the cruise goes the other way, and
Right.
then
Hmm.
you end up in Thailand. From Mumbai, we flew to Delhi, and that was the start of our Golden Triangle
Hmm.
bus tour. This was now by bus. Wonderful accommodation the first night in Delhi. The Taj Sawai Man Mahai. That's quite a long name for a hotel. Apparently, the royal family also stayed in the palace that's just on the same grounds. And unfortunately, we got there too late to actually go through the palace also. But our dining facilities, that section, was just like a palace as well. It was just incredible. The mirrors, the photographs of different royalties and people like your Jackie Onassis visited
Hmm.
there, all on display still. And then we had the ballroom was where we had our dinner, and they had people playing traditional instruments. And oh, it was just a wonderful experience. The welcome we got was also people dressed up in costume like a horse and dancing with that. Just amazing sights we saw there. And the peacocks on the roofs. It was a bit like a fairy tale to land there. Yeah, Delhi is very interesting because you have New Delhi, which
Hmm.
has the old buildings, beautiful old buildings, and big malls, but it's also where the ancient Mughals lived. And then the old Delhi, where the markets are, and we took a rickshaw ride through there, which was quite an experience to get up close and personal to all the people living there and selling their wares, and the tiny, narrow little passages that
Hmm.
they pop out of, and the spices, mounds of spices on wheelbarrows. And that was a wonderful experience. Yes.
You said this is a Golden Triangle tour, so we're doing Delhi
Delhi,
and
Jaipur was
Agra
the,
and Jaipur.
yeah,
Okay.
Jaipur was the next one.
Hmm.
And Jaipur, of course, is also known as the Pink City.
Right.
And this was a wonderful day also. We went up to a certain point, we were picked up by a jeep, and we went up a hill to Amber Fort, where you
Yep.
can also do elephant rides. But Viking does not support that because of rumors of cruelty to elephants. But it is quite a sight to see, especially when you go up the road and an elephant comes past and then a camel comes past. But the Amber Fort is worth visiting because
Oh yeah.
you have the wonderful Chamber of Mirrors and the Hall of Victory. Then after that, we visited a place where they showed us how they did the block patterns on materials.
The batik printing.
Yes, the batik printing, and then also the handmade rugs and how they wash them and prepare them. Very interesting. And then we also visited Jai Singh's observatory.
Oh
With,
sure. Hmm. Jantar Mantar.
oh, Janta Manta. But what struck me was the unusual traffic on the road. Trucks converted into all sorts of things, and rickshaws, and 4 or 5 people, the whole family on one motorbike. And then at one stage, our bus driver had to stop and got into an argument with the local traffic police because the buses were not supposed to go down that road that particular day for some reason or other. So this was quite interesting to see how quickly a mob gathered. We were a little concerned, but all's well that ended well. We managed to make a turn there. And oh yeah, then we also went to the Raj Palace Hotel that night, which was Also a fabulous place. That was a great experience. I wish we could have stayed longer because I would have loved to have explored the pink city itself because it's so impressive. Bit short time there.
And then your last stop being Agra.
Agra,
And I'm
yeah.
guessing I know why you went there.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights, of course, to see the Taj Mahal.
Hmm.
Now, our bus driver did a good job, our tour leader, should I rather say. We arrived in the evening, so then we could have a view of the Taj Mahal from the front. Because if you visit Taj Mahal, you don't see the front of the building on that side of the river. You must go to the opposite side of the river. And so we had an evening view of the Taj Mahal as the sun went down to see the front of the building. And then we all decided we'll get up very early the next morning so that we could see sunrise at the Taj Mahal. We got up early and oh, that was really great. The inside of the where the coffins, what do you call those? I've
Hmm.
forgotten the name now.
Tomb,
Where
sarcophagus.
yeah, there's yeah, very intricate. Also, all the wonderful lace work with the stone and
Hmm.
how they carve them out. It's really amazing. Yeah, that was quite a highlight. Yeah.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, anything else you want to say about the overall experience or the onboard, on ship experience as we get back to the cruise?
All I can say is that I can highly recommend this cruise because it just puts you in a different world altogether, and it gives you such a wider perspective of how big the world is and how many different cultures there are, and also what did strike me in India, and I don't know if it was just our tour guide, but they were actually quite proud of the British influence. And although they are turning some of the British buildings into palaces, hotels, and the palaces are turned into hotels, and they are building Indian style parliamentary buildings in another area. So they don't discard the old cultures, they incorporate things. And that is one thing that struck me, that there is such a thing as that people can come together and work with what happened in the past and make peace with things. That to me was quite a lesson.
Any place that now that you've done this overview kind of tour that you want to get back to?
I'd actually love to go back to India.
Okay.
We did eat spiced food and curries and things the whole 5 days. So I must say, I was thinking, oh, a McDonald's hamburger will be actually quite nice now. and I'm a
Not going to
great
find that in India. I'll tell you that for sure.
and I'm a great curry lover. 5 days on that diet. Anyway, I'm just joking. No, it was really wonderful, and I'd love to see Thailand again because I just loved the cultural dancing. And I must say, I was the only one in the audience who got up and volunteered to dance on stage with them. And I could keep up halfway, and then I had to go and sit down.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up here, we've got some standard questions we usually ask. You're standing in the prettiest spot you saw on this tour, on this cruise or the tour. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I will have to say the Taj Mahal.
Okay.
It's just the romanticism of the building.
Okay. Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in this region of the world.
It must be the traffic.
Okay.
Yeah. Mind you, I did see it in Tanzania also.
You lived in South Africa for a while. I'm
Yeah.
surprised you hadn't seen a family, four people on a motorbike
No, we don't
before.
see that in South Africa.
Okay.
I
I've seen
see
that
that
all over the world.
in Tanzania, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize this cruise in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Oh, luxury, educational, being spoiled rotten, comfort, again, comfort. You
Comfort.
didn't have to unpack and repack every night.
Excellent. And we introduced Elsa and we said that she was a travel writer. You can read her book, which is not under Elsa Dixon, but under her maiden name of Elsa, and let's see if I can say it, van der Bijl.
That's right. Yes.
That's with a V, not an F, even though I'm saying it that way. And it's Hippos, Hotspots, and Homelands, which is wonderful alliteration here. But what is your book about?
It's a book about being an educator during the last 20 years of my life there in South Africa, during the time of the transition from apartheid to the new government. And I was involved in education. I was principal of a teacher training college, and we were held hostage by our students. I was held hostage at least 4 times because I traveled from one college to the others. I started in Ciskei, and then I'm where Fort Hare University was, and that was where Mandela also studied. And I got my master's there at Fort Hare. And then I went to the South Sotho people, and then I went to the Shangaan people. So all these different cultures appear in the book as well. That's where the homelands feature, because I traveled from homeland to homeland. And I lived in the Sabi Sand Game Reserve, which is adjoining to Kruger National Park. And I taught piano actually in the Kruger Park at Skukuza. So while I was teaching at the college nearby. And of course I had wild animal experiences, and that's where the hippos come in. Yeah, and the hotspots refer to the crime in the country, and
Okay.
I have had experience of that too. So that's basically, my book is on Amazon, and it's also on Audible and Kindle.
Excellent. We'll put a link to Hippos, Hotspots, and Homelands in the show notes of this episode. Elsa, thanks so much for coming on this episode of Amateur Traveler and telling us about your wonderful expedition here in the East.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to listening to your programs now.
Special thanks go out to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. They get the show early, they get the ad-free version, which means their version always has the chapters and links in it. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I heard recently on the episode we did on New York from Rick, who said your guest Rebecca sent mixed messages about Central Park. First, she said Central Park was just a park with grass and trees, that there are some more interesting parks in New York City. Then you asked her about her favorite place in New York City, and she said Central Park in the fall. So, question mark, question mark, question mark. Central Park is in the top 10 list of places to visit when I bring friends to New York City. And if it is in the fall, much, much better. In Mexico, we don't have too much of changing colors in the fall, so going to Central Park in the fall would be a real treat for my friends and me. As with all advice given on Amateur Traveler by my guests, by myself, or whatever, hopefully it gives you some information and you can decide for yourself. Do we sometimes, both my guests and I, sometimes give contradictory information? Are we illogical sometimes? Yes, we are. It's the way people think, I would have to say. It's one of the reasons why I tell my guests I really only have 2 questions. Why should you go and what should you do? But I have different ways of asking that second question, because sometimes if I ask it one way, you'll get one answer, and if I ask it a different way, it will bring out different information. That's at least what I'm trying to do. So yes, that information certainly sounds contradictory, but there you go. Rick also commented on the recent episode that we did on a train trip around the UK and said, great itinerary. However, I would not forgive myself if I visited the UK for 14 days and had not visited Cambridge and/or Oxford. I suspect that if we asked 10 different people, we could get 10 different itineraries. I, like you, thought that was a good one, but I know what you mean. I've been to Cambridge. I haven't been to Oxford yet, but love Cambridge. So those of you who are listening might consider Rick's advice as well. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more.